Hey, welcome to my website. Glad you're looking over some things we're talking about this week and in the future, reading columns and having a good time. Great news, by the way, in my opinion. One of the things I agree with our new president, I don't agree with everything he's doing in his fast start, but is he's announced he's going to release the investigative files of John F. Kennedy. Kennedy was killed about 60 years ago now. And all of this time, most of the files as to the investigation, who might have done it, all the kinds of facts that took place have been kept secluded. Public couldn't see it. I don't know why. I'm sure there's some embarrassing details about the president's personal life and other things that some people would rather not have public, but I think it's the right thing to do to release all these documents about the Kennedy investigation. And I'm anxious to see it because I've taken a great deal of interest in the Kennedy investigation. It looks like either he was the killer or very much involved. This guy, Lee Harvey Oswald, was born in New Orleans, spent a great deal of his life in New Orleans, was in New Orleans just before he went to Dallas for the assassination. Uh, and there was a group around him that he knew that later were people accused of being part of a conspiracy to kill Kennedy. And I looked into this a lot. I felt like there was all kinds of theories. The CIA did it because he was being too friendly with Cuba and Russia, and all kinds of wild theories. I'm really convinced that people tied to the mafia had Kennedy killed. They had actively, I say they, a number of mafia well-known groups had supported Kennedy for president, had gone to bat for him in a number of rumored activities. He apparently had a girlfriend, Kennedy did, that was tied to one of the mafia leaders. And so I think when Kennedy didn't respond, and particularly Bobby Kennedy, who was the attorney general under his brother as president, Bobby Kennedy took a real hard line against the mafia and did a lot of investigations, a great deal in New Orleans. A guy named Carlos Marcella was one of the five major families in this country that operated out of New Orleans. And so there were rumors that they were involved. And then Jim Garrison got involved at a big Jim. He was about 6'6", I think, big guy. And he took off on the investigation. You might have seen the Kevin Costner movie about the Kennedy assassination. Costner did a great job in that motion picture, by the way, in my opinion. And the Kennedy felt like there was a conspiracy in New Orleans, and he named certain names and tried them. None were convicted, and he was embarrassed and ostracized and died shortly thereafter. Somewhat disgraced, although in my opinion, Garrison did a pretty good job of cleaning up New Orleans, taking on a number of investigations. I knew Garrison personally. I belonged to a place called the New Orleans Athletic Club when I was practicing law in New Orleans. And it was the hangout for a lot of the politicians. The judges and other politicians would have a gin rummy poker game there just about every day. And they'd get a massage and work out some maybe. I worked out there a great deal after I finished my daily chores in my law practice. I was a young associate well behind the years. And or I'd go there at noon. The group would always be there. And I had a locker right next to Jim Garrison. So I had talked with Garrison on a number of occasions. We both shared an interest in politics. He inferred he might run for governor one day. Gave me a lot of advice. I like Jim Garrison, but he got hung up in this investigation that blew up in his face and tainted him for the rest of his life. Maybe wrongly, maybe not. I feel like there was a direction that Garrison was on the right track. He named some names who knew Oswald and were involved in nefarious activities in New Orleans. And I felt there was a plot there. I don't know who was behind it, but I think the mafia money was there that from a number of locations in this country to not be part of the assassination, but I think they in some way influenced Lee Harvey Oswald to go to Dallas and carry on the assassination that was successful of John Kennedy. We'll maybe know a lot more when these documents are released. I hope so. And I had a chance to find out a little bit more. A few years back, most of these folks tied to the mafia in New Orleans, like Carlos Marcello and other members of his family, had died off. But there was one guy that uh, rumor had it was financed by mafia ties for a popular restaurant in New Orleans. I knew the guy and went there to eat. It was great Italian food. And my sister, who was married to the sheriff of Plaquemine Parish, just below New Orleans, was very close to this restaurant owner. Just good friends. He took her under wing, liked her. She'd go there, take her girlfriends for lunch. Well, her husband died. And a few years later, when just about everybody tied to the New Orleans Mafia had died, I asked my sister, I said, look, you know this guy very, very well. And I wonder if you'd approach him like this. He knew me and he always said nice things about me. I was an elected official at the time. And I said, what if I just came by his house one day to have coffee one morning? And I'd like to ask him some questions about maybe something tied to the mafia in general in New Orleans, and particularly the Kennedy assassination. I will swear to him I would never reveal a thing until after he died. Would he consider doing that? So my sister called him, and she called me back, said, yes, he was enthusiastic. He'd like to get some things off his chest and tell it. As long as you'll promise not to reveal anything until after he died, he'll be glad to visit with you. So we agreed to visit on a Tuesday morning, I believe. I was going to come to New Orleans. I was in New Orleans a good bit at that time. And over 60 years, I've always had an apartment in New Orleans. So I came down, spent the night, and I was going to be there on a Tuesday. Sunday night, my sister called me and says, you're not going to believe this. And I said, what? What happened? She says, I'm not going to give the guy's name, but the fellow that was going to do the interview, I was going to do the interview with, she said, he died of a heart attack last night. 24 hours later, I might have had the story of the century, but he passed away and I never got any additional information. So in any event, that's my tie. And, Kennedy was very popular in my home state of Louisiana. He kicked off his campaign for president in Crowley, Louisiana, where they had the Rice Festival. There were several 100,000 people in the streets, big Catholic area. Kennedy was Catholic. All of the locals flocked to support him, and he kind of kicked it off right there. He's going to be, he wanted to go to a friendly location, and he knew Crowley was a friendly location. He was very close to our future governor, Edwin Edwards, who was a congressman at the time. And so Kennedy sought out Louisiana, and most historians, or at least I feel this way, and a number of Louisiana historians feel this way, that Kennedy kicked off his campaign in Louisiana. He loved a lot of folks in Louisiana, very popular down here. I know we're a Republican state now, but he overwhelmingly carried the state against Richard Nixon, and a very popular president. And I thought that maybe I would get to the bottom of what happened for the Kennedy assassination. Now, one reason I'm telling you all this is the documents are going to be released, it looks like, in a few weeks. And when they come out, maybe we'll see if I was onto something. In any event, I'll write about it in a column here in a couple of weeks when Trump releases the documents. He announced a couple of days ago he was going to release the documents. Stay tuned and you can see my column. Hey, enjoy my columns and other things on my website. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you here next week. Take care.